Hi everybody, and welcome back to The Diligent Doc. I'm glad you're here for another video, and today's topic is something that ties in what I do in my career and how I link it into my everyday life. As some of you might know, I am a palliative care physician. So what that means is that we see patients who are facing some kind of serious illness, and we can see patients at any age or at any stage of their illness. So for example, a common diagnosis that we see is cancer in adult patients. So we can see them from the get-go when they first get diagnosed all the way through until the end of life, if they're reaching the end of life. So how does this tie into how I approach my daily life? The lessons that I have learned from being a palliative care physician have a lot to do with teaching me what's important when it comes to living your best life. So here are 7 lessons that I have learned from working in palliative care that people who are nearing the end of life have taught me about living. The first one is that age does not matter. A lot of people hear palliative care and they think maybe I only see elderly patients or geriatric patients, but this is not the case. Unfortunately, people at any age can encounter serious illness. One thing I'm glad about is that I'm not a pediatrician. I don't see pediatric patients, but believe it or not, there is a field of pediatric palliative care. In fact, when I was a fellow, I did have to do 1 full month in the pediatric palliative care setting. And it taught me a lot of different things. It wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, but it was certainly challenging to see sick children and what their families go through as well. But in the adult spectrum, I do see patients as young as 18 sometimes. But I've seen some people in their young 20s and certainly in their 30s and 40s who face a lot of serious illness. And a lot more now I've noticed cancer. Cancer has been rising, especially in younger and younger patients, and you probably have heard about this on the news as well. In my perspective, and this is probably anecdotal, but I think a lot has to do with nutrition and lifestyle and the consumption of the different foods that we have readily available to us at all times, I think does drive a lot of disease, including a lot of the cancers that we see in these young patients. So it may also be environmental, of course. Some of it's going to be genetics, but it's not all genetics. So for that reason, I think it's very important to focus on how is your lifestyle now, because many people think, okay, well, when I get sick, I'm going to be a lot older than I am now, but that's just not true. In the last few months, and I would say the last year or so, I've had numerous patients in their early 30s pass away from things like metastatic stage 4 cancers, or from advanced heart disease or kidney failure, also liver failure, because alcoholism has certainly ramped up as well throughout the pandemic. So that is affecting people at younger and younger ages. And as a side note, when I say alcoholism, it's also not what you might think. Somebody who's still functioning and working can still be considered dependent on alcohol and have the adverse effects of alcohol on their body and on their liver, even if you might not see the external signs of it all the time. So it does take a toll. All of these different lifestyle things that we partake in, they're not benign. So if there's one thing that I would get across to you is, even if you are in your 20s or 30s, start focusing on living a healthy lifestyle now. Don't wait till it's too late to change your ways. The second thing I want to say, which ties into the first, is that prevention is key. Trying to reduce your risk is key. For example, everybody now knows that smoking is bad for your health. Smoking leads to lung cancer, not to mention a slew of other cancers. And it can cause COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is a very debilitating illness. And there's warnings on cigarette packages and warnings on tobacco products. Tobacco can cause head and neck cancer, which is another set of problems that I would never wish on anyone. So people know about certain things that will cause disease, and then they can go from there to choose to partake or not partake. But I think what gets missed is the simpler things that we know can help us, that it's harder for most people to do those things on a daily basis or a weekly basis. For example, it's easier to avoid cigarettes, but it may be harder to go out for a walk or a run several times a week. One is just abstaining from something, and the other is actually taking active effort to do something that's good for you. So I understand that, it is hard to get yourself motivated to do active things that are going to improve your health and well-being. Another example would be meal planning or meal prepping. It's easy to go out to eat every day, but it's harder to think, okay, what am I going to eat this week? And let me prep it ahead of time. Let me package it so that it's ready to go and I don't have to think about it. Even if it's not 7 days a week, even if it's not 5 days a week, can you save some time, money, and improve your health by packing your own food or making your own dinners a couple times a week, that if that's an improvement from where you were before. So all of these things are aimed at trying to take little steps every day that will help reduce your risk of getting sick in the future. The third big lesson I want to impart to everyone is that now is the best time to start planning ahead for the end of life, because like I said before, you never know when that's going to happen. Nobody can predict that. And a lot of times people reach that point and they're unable to make their own decisions. They're incapacitated in some way, whether it's physically or mentally. And they have to rely on someone else to act in their best interest and to make medical decisions or financial or legal decisions on their behalf. Well, if you've never thought about who that person is going to be, you may be disappointed to know that that person may end up legally being someone you don't want it to be. For example, say you're in a romantic relationship with someone for 25 years and you get sick and you can't make your own decisions. That person is not legally the person in the state of Georgia anyway to be able to make decisions for you medically, much less anything else. So you have to get in place paperwork, legal documentation that says who you want to make medical decisions for you and what kind of other decisions you might want them to make, whether they have access to your finances and things like that. Because without those documents, it may be someone who does not have your best interests at heart, and that would not go well. I can't tell you the amount of patients we've seen who maybe only had cousins or nephews or nieces or aunts and uncles, and unfortunately those people are not on the list or on the hierarchy of legal medical decision makers. And then it's a problem because the patient can no longer decide. So then you have to go through a whole process of figuring out who is going to make decisions for this patient. Sometimes it has to go to the court of law. That's a very lengthy and time-consuming process. I've had several patients who were just in the hospital for 6, 8, 10, 12 months because they didn't have a medical decision maker. And in that time frame, they just had a steeper and steeper decline and ultimately passed away in the hospital, oftentimes alone and with nobody by their side other than the nurses who were taking care of them. That's pretty sad, when you think about it. So even maybe you have a spouse or you have adult children, you might have 5 children and maybe you only want one of them to speak for you medically. You need to make sure that you have that somewhere in documentation that's legally binding. As far as the state of Georgia, that document for medical decisions is called an advance directive. It does not need to be notarized. It just needs to be signed by you and witnessed by 2 people who are not the people that you choose to be your healthcare power of attorney. So if you name your best friend as your healthcare power of attorney, that best friend cannot then witness it. It has to be 2 other people. And once that's done, it is done. Another example to think about is someone who maybe completed an advance directive when they were 50 and healthy, and then at age 65, they get diagnosed with some kind of terminal disease, and the things that they said in their initial advance directive no longer apply to the current situation because it would not be beneficial to them anymore. So it's always good to try to revisit what you have stated in your advance directive, probably on a yearly basis, but if you don't let it go 5 or 10 years without looking at it. Now, just because you have a medical power of attorney or a durable power of attorney, those are not the same. So if you have a durable power of attorney who can access your finances and your properties and your banks and all that, they don't have any legal authority to make medical decisions for you. So those are 2 separate things. These can be looked up online or done online for free, for example, with LegalZoom, or if you have an attorney, you can always consult with an attorney to help you fill this paperwork out. And once you have it completed, make sure you let the person know that you've chosen them to make medical decisions for them, because they don't want to be surprised and caught off guard if you get sick and you can't make decisions and the hospital's calling them up and maybe you haven't seen them in 10 years, So make sure you always inform the person that you've chosen to make decisions for you that you have chosen them, because you want them to be able to agree and take on that responsibility. The fourth thing I would say that I've learned is it's very important to assess what you deem to be a good quality of life for yourself, because that doesn't always mean being able to go on fancy vacations or buy fancy things. The quality of life I'm talking about is as far as your physical functioning. So what do you want to be able to do, and how long do you want to do those things for? And keep those things in mind whenever you are faced with making any type of medical decision. For example, you might have the opportunity to undergo treatment for a rare illness, but weigh the pros and the cons, weigh the risks and the benefits with the guidance of the medical team. No one expects you to go out and research everything by yourself. That's why there are people who have already done the research and had years and years of medical training to help you guide your decision. But always think about, okay, if I'm faced with taking this specific treatment, whether it's as simple as a blood transfusion or as complicated as something like chemotherapy or an organ transplant, think about your capability of withstanding that treatment and whether that is going to realistically help you achieve your goal based on what you feel is a good quality of life. For some people, quality of life means being with their family and being able to do things and leave the house. And for other people, quality of life simply means being alive. Even if they can't do anything else, even if they're in a nursing home and bedbound, just being alive is enough for them. So it's not that we are trying to sway what you think is a good quality of life, but just trying to understand which path do you see for yourself, and can what we're offering you medically help you achieve that. The sixth thing I'd like to mention that I've learned from working in palliative care is to think twice before relying only on alternative or holistic treatments. And I may get a lot of slack for saying this, and I don't want anyone to think that I think those methods are not helpful. I do find a lot of benefit in a holistic approach to health and well-being. I'm the first person who's going to be talking about nutritional supplements and superfoods, whether they're scientifically backed or not, and meditation or your overall well-being. But I don't think they're the be-all end-all, just like I don't think that all of Western medicine is the be-all end-all of making people well. In fact, a lot of Western medicine I don't think is geared towards making people well at all, but rather just trying to mask the symptoms of disease that we could have prevented in the first place. So the biggest realm that I see this take place in is patients, especially younger patients who get diagnosed with cancer and they want to take the alternative route or the holistic route, and they shirk the suggestions of the doctors to go through standard treatments for the cancer. So somebody might come in with a curable cancer, like an early stage breast cancer or a lymphoma or something like that they can take a course of treatment for and cure it. That is the goal of the treatment, so that it doesn't come back anymore, that it doesn't get worse. But they will say no to that treatment and instead go to the natural holistic route. 100% of the time, those patients will end up getting worse in their disease at some point and eventually dying, unfortunately. And it's just challenging because everybody has autonomy to make their own decisions, and all you can do is counsel and educate and urge someone to go through the standard of treatment for their illness. But if they choose not to, you can't really force them to. So I would say, I think that alternative treatments, if it makes you feel better or makes you feel like you're doing something extra to help yourself get well, one by itself is just not going to do the job. Whether it's Western medicine or whether it's holistic natural treatments, I think they work beautifully together if done in a controlled manner. So think about that next time you go to see your doctor. The last thing I have learned from working in palliative care is that no one should assume that they deserve anything. So a couple times I've had patients who get faced with a serious illness diagnosis and they are just flabbergasted, or they are just not understanding, or they're questioning, why did that happen to them? And of course, this is something I never say out loud, but in my mind, after years and years of seeing patients facing serious illness and even seeing children facing serious illness, the question is not why did this happen, but why wouldn't it happen? Why wouldn't this happen to me? Why would I be special where I wouldn't get sick? Or what makes me more deserving of living longer than someone else? Nothing. Nothing makes any of us more deserving than anybody else of living a long and healthy life. So just try to remember that a lot of things in life are random. A lot of disease could be random. As much as I do believe things can be preventable, not every disease is going to be preventable despite our best efforts. And so if something happens, or if there's an accident or anything like that, any life event happens, the question is not why me, but why not me? And I think that perspective shift helps with maybe dealing with it a little bit better and coping with it a little bit better. And maybe that's something I also picked up from listening to all the daily Stoic podcasts that I listen to all the time. So that's all I have for you today, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any other tidbits or things, life lessons you have learned along the way, whether through your career or through your personal experience, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. So please check out my next video, and if you're looking for some other videos to watch in the meantime, I'll link them here. Take care.